guys, it's Melissa from MelsCardCorner.com, and today I thought it would be fun to make a card using one of the stamp sets I got from the new catalog. This is Spotlight on Nature. I love these images. I think they're going to be a lot of fun to color, but you could also use them kind of silhouette style, I think. Well, not silhouette style necessarily because it's not a solid image, but just uncolored, we'll say, just a plain stamped image. But I am going to do a little bit of coloring with them today, I think. We'll see how it all turns out. So, like I said, I'm going to use this stamp set, and I want to do a little bit of masking, I think. And so I took some masking paper, and to give it a bit of an interesting edge, see how it looks kind of torn? I used one of the Deckled Rectangles dies. As you can see, I've used the fourth one up from the smallest. So there's 3 smaller, 4 larger. That's where this one fits into the equation. And then I've got a piece of our new basic beige cardstock. And so I want to put the mask on here. And then I want to do some ink blending. And I think what I want to do is create kind of a tone-on-tone effect. So I'm going to ink blend some basic beige on the basic beige. I just want it very subtle, but I want a little something to help create a focal point for my images. So that's the plan. And then I think for my coloring, let me get the glare off of that. I just moved it to another glare spot. I think I want to use a couple of the new in colors in the Stampin' Blends. I have got Summer Splash and Peach Pie. So I think that's what I'm going to use. Obviously the peach for the flowers and the Summer Splash for the leaves and stems. So let me kind of get things together and we'll get started. Okay, I am back and now I have a cautionary tale. Yeah, what I showed you in that first clip when I was going over the products, when I showed you the mask I had created, I had accidentally grabbed the adhesive sheets instead of the masking paper and quickly realized my mistake when I went to put it on my piece of basic beige, and I kept thinking, why is this so sticky? So yes, make sure if you decide to try this technique, make sure you've grabbed the proper product and that it's masking sheets and not adhesive sheets. I've learned, I took the hit for you all. So learn from my mistake. Okay, so since we're going to do a little bit of ink blending here, I'm going to bring in a piece of grid paper for my work surface. And just making sure my edges are all down nice and even. And then we're going to bring in the basic beige ink. And a blending brush. Now this is not a Stampin' Up! Blending brush. I already had blending brushes when I joined Stampin' Up! As a demonstrator, so I am using what I have now. I think this is probably similar to their small brush, so I'm kind of interested in picking up some of the large ones, because for something like this, a larger one would be really nice. And then I'm just gonna, get the excess off, and then come in around that edge. And at this point, you're probably not going to be able to see a whole lot. Again, this is going to be a kind of subtle look for this. Now that I have all my edges, I'm just going to come into the center a little bit, kind of go in both directions to make sure I'm getting good equal coverage. There, I think that's good. So we will close up that ink. And now comes the fun part. We're going to peel off this mask. and see our really pretty results. Now, if you want, you can save this mask to use again. You would just always want to be sure that you use it with a similar color, because you wouldn't want to reactivate any of the ink on those edges if you were using. Now, in this case, it probably might not matter so much since we used such a mild, light color, a soft color. But if you were using something like Night of Navy or Blackberry Bliss, you wouldn't then want to use this mask for something like Petal Pink, because you're just going to pull those darker colors in potentially. Because since this is a dye-based ink, when it gets wet again, it could reactivate some of that ink. So just be sure you kind of use your masks for similar colors. In this case, I am not going to save this since it's such a kind of specialty shape, and I don't know how often I would use that. So I'm just going to go on and throw this away today. Actually, I think I will keep this out for my coloring as well. Okay, and now I am going to bring in my Stamparatus, trying to decide which way I want to use the door. We'll do it this way. And now, since I'm using a cling stamp, I'm going to take out the foam insert. And now I do have a magnet sheet in mine. I got this from Stamp and Storage. Since I'm using a cling stamp, I might not actually need that. But I find with photopolymer, it really helps a lot to make sure I'm getting a good coverage. Let me grab my magnets. Now, unfortunately, Stampin' Up! No longer sells a Stamparatus, but I mean, you could do this with a Misty Altenew stamp wheel. I have all the things, so I am just using the Stamparatus today because I had it out and easy to access. And now we'll line up the flower, and I want it off those edges a little bit, but a lot of the image overlapping that rectangle we created. Now, I clearly need to clean my door. Okay, and let me just put the stamps box under there to make sure I'm getting a nice even surface for stamping. I'm just using Memento ink. This is the ink to use with the Stampin' Blends or any other alcohol marker. It is alcohol marker friendly. Just inking that up really well. And then just applying some nice even pressure. That looks pretty good, but let's give it one more just to ensure we have a nice image. Kind of wanted it a little more on those internal leaves, especially. We'll kind of focus on those. Oh yes, much better. Okay, so now you'll see me back here in just a second, but I'm going to let this dry for a couple of minutes, so I will be right back with you. Okay, I am back. I've let this dry for maybe 4 or 5 minutes, and let's do some coloring now. I'm going to bring in my Stampin' Blends markers, and we're going to start first with the dark peach pie, and I'm going to come in on these flowers and create kind of some shadows to where things would be darkest. So like behind this petal, it's going to be darker, and then at the base it'll be darker. Behind here, it's going to be darker. And the artists at Stampin' Up! Have done a really great job on this of kind of indicating where your darker areas would be with how they have created the stamped image. And now I am just occasionally wiping my marker off over here. Just because this is such heavy black at the base on these, I just want to make sure I'm not picking up any of that if it's not completely dry. And again, I'm going to come in behind that forwardmost petal and create some shadows. And then the same thing over here. Going to put in some shadows where petals are behind other petals. This is my forwardmost petal right here. So it's not going to get anything on the side, but it will get some here at the base, which helps create that rounded look of a flower. Okay, so now, again, I'm just going to rub off that marker tip. And if you prefer, you can use the brush tip. Since these are really small areas, I find I have a little bit better control using the bullet nib end, but you can do it whichever way you would like. So now I'm going to come back in and I'm just going to make small circular motions. I hope you can see that. Yeah. Where I have those darker areas. I'm not touching anything else yet, just kind of doing some round circular motions over the edge of those darker areas just to blend it out a little bit before I go in and fill in the rest of the flower. That just helps it blend a little bit better. Okay, so now that we've done that, now I think I am going to switch over to the brush nib for this last part, and then I'm just going to come in and fill in the rest of that with kind of as close to one stroke as I can. I don't want to over blend, but I want to get the rest of that filled in. There we go. I got a little bit out of the line there. That's okay. It does not matter. Unless someone is looking really closely, they will probably never notice. They will probably be more impressed to know that you colored this yourself. And now, just to kind of pop those darker areas a bit more, I'm going to come back in one more time with the dark and just kind of accentuate. I don't need to do it at the base because Stampin' Up! Artists have done a great job of putting in a lot of color at the base. But I do want to make sure I don't lose my shadows behind those forward petals. So I'm just going to add a little bit of that back in. I feel like that really makes a good difference and worth the effort. Okay, so now let's move on to our leaves. And again, we're going to start with the dark, and this is Summer Splash. And again, Stampin' Up! Has done a great job. They've got a lot of detail in these leaves. So this is going to be very simple coloring. I'm just going to put in some dark along the base and then a tiny bit up the left-hand side of the petals that are leaning out to the left. Again, I went out of the line. I am not at all worried about that. It will not matter. The ones that are pointing straight up, I'm not putting the edge extra a little bit. Now these are pointing to the right. I'm going to do the same thing, but this time I'm going to add that extra little bit along the right edge. Because in my mind, the sun is just shining down on these flowers. And so it would be a top shadow. So these that are pointing straight up, they're not going to have anything as much over to the sides. Okay, there we go. And now I'm just going to come back in with the light Summer Splash. Again, just kind of circle around that and then just fill in. I'm not switching brush tips on this because it's such a small area. Ooh, I really went out on that one. But, you know, it's okay. What's the old saying? It's handmade, not Hallmark. I'm also a recovering perfectionist, so I am learning, you know, just let go of things. You know, is it going to matter in 100 years if I went out of that line a little bit? Not in the least. I mean, honestly, you can barely see it. You have to really be looking to see that little spot where I went out and that little spot where I went out. If you're down here, you don't even notice it. So give yourself some grace and don't feel like you have to be perfect. So now, on these stems, there's not a whole lot that needs to be colored, but there are a couple of sections that are just kind of standing out to me that are not as black as some of these others. So I'm just going to come back in with the dark. I'm not doing any shading here. I am just filling in that stem. I think that's good. Okay, so that has my coloring done. See what a difference just masking off and putting that basic beige rectangle down makes on this card? It just helps it. Otherwise, you've just got a flower floating in midair. But this, you doing this ink blending in the background, it kind of grounds that flower. Okay, so we can get this grid paper out of the way now. And let's see, I think maybe we'll use this Thanks sentiment. I apologize, guys. I forgot to hit start recording on my phone as I did some of this. But let me just walk you through real quick what I did. I have a card base that I have created from a piece of basic white thick. I cut it to 8.5 by 5.5. Scored it at 4 1/4 along that long side, which gives me a standard A2 size card base. I trimmed my focal image piece down to 3 3/4 by 5. And to make sure that my image stayed centered, since I got a half inch off in both directions, I did a 1/4 inch on each side. That way my image stayed nice and centered. And so that's just going to go onto the card like that. And then I took one of those stamped sentiments and just trimmed it down. And I just kind of eyeballed it when I trimmed it out and then cut the one edge to an angle for a little bit more interest. And so now let's get this all assembled. Let me grab my glue. And you can put this down with any type of adhesive you like. I just happen to prefer liquid adhesives, but you could certainly use Stampin' Seal or tear tape, whatever you like. So now I'm going to use my grid mat here to make sure I get this lined up. That looks pretty good. Okay, let me put the lid back on my glue. And then I'm going to grab some dimensionals for the sentiment. Okay. I'm just going to line up the white edge. Oh, I don't know if I said when I stamped that sentiment, I stamped it on the basic white as well, but just the regular, not the thick. Okay, and now let's add a little bit of embellishment. There we go. These are the In Color Shimmer Gems that coordinate with the 2024 to 2026 In Colors. So we could use peach or we could use the Summer Splash. I think I kind of like the peach better, so let's go with those. Pardon my reach. Ooh, and these are very shimmery. I think I'm just going to put a couple here, down here around the sentiment. We'll put one large and one small there, and then we'll put one small up here. And I think that shall do it. I really hope you've enjoyed this card today. This was kind of the technique I wanted to show, was this masked subtle background. I just really feel like it adds so much to kind of give a little more depth to what is otherwise a very simple card, just stamps, ink, and paper. Ink in this case being the Stampin' Blend markers. But that's it for today. I hope everyone has a lovely weekend, and I will see you the next time. And before you leave, if you've not already subscribed to my channel, I hope you'll hit that subscribe button. And I think I'm going to try and go for posting videos every Friday. But if you want to be sure you don't miss anything, make sure you hit that little bell icon, and then you'll be notified anytime I post a new video. All right, thanks a lot, guys, and I hope everyone has a great day. Bye-bye.